My husband stole our mansion. My best friend stole my bed. And outside the courthouse, he leaned in and whispered, "You're pathetic." That was the last day I'd ever feel powerless. Moments earlier, the judge's gavel came down like a coffin lid, sealing away 25 years of work, sacrifice, and love. My husband left that room grinning, clutching the keys to the $3.4 million mansion we built together, and half of everything else I had earned. His lawyer carried the victory in his briefcase. And him? He carried it in his smug little smile. As we stepped into the sunlight, he leaned close, not to whisper a memory, not to honor the years we spent building a life, but to cut me open one last time. He looked me straight in the eye and said two words that would burn into me long after the echo of the courtroom faded. "You're pathetic." That insult hit harder than any verdict. He walked off arm in arm with my so-called best friend Marissa, the woman who had been by my side since college. Neither of them looked back. That night, I curled up in the driver's seat of my beat-up SUV behind a roadside diner off Route 11, staring at the ceiling fabric like it might hold the answer to where my life had gone wrong. And just when I thought I'd hit rock bottom, my phone rang. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. The voice on the other end was calm, almost rehearsed. "Ms. Whitaker, we've been trying to reach you for 15 years. This is the Brecht Private Banking Group in Zurich. You are the sole heir to an account belonging to Eleanor Whitaker." My breath caught. My Aunt Eleanor had vanished decades ago without a trace. Then came the number, slow and deliberate. The balance, $47 million. I met Daniel when I was still practically a kid. By 21, I was already standing at the altar with him, convinced I'd found the man I'd grow old with. He had this spark in his eyes, the kind that made a room feel smaller when he walked in. I fell for him fast, recklessly, the way only young love lets you. We started with almost nothing. A one-bedroom apartment just outside Albany, thrift store furniture, and dreams far too big for the space we lived in. I hustled every shift I could at a diner during the day and pushed through night classes in nursing. Daniel swung a hammer wherever he could, roofing, framing, remodeling. We were partners in survival back then, celebrating our first tax return like it was a Powerball win. Those nights, I'd bring him lemonade and half a sandwich, sit with him on the porch of the fixer-upper we bought with borrowed credit, and we'd talk about the life we were building nail by nail. I believed in us so deeply it felt unshakable. Looking back, that's what makes what came later cut so deep. His hard work paid off. Eventually, he built his own crew. Jobs got bigger, bids came in higher, and one year, a city contract flipped everything. That's when I thought I'd finally give him the life he deserved. I surprised him with a mansion, not a glass box on a hill, but a brick estate with ivy curling up its sides, tucked into the quiet of Westchester County. 5 bedrooms, a wine cellar we never touched, and a garden I swore I'd fill with lavender. The price tag was $3.4 million. I scraped together nearly all cash and financed the rest. For a moment, I thought it was the dream we'd been fighting for. He called it a real home. But that's also where the cracks began. Daniel started drifting into country clubs, charity boards, wine tastings. He talked less about dinners with me and more about appearances with them. I told myself it was growth, that maybe I just needed to catch up. I didn't know then that the mansion I bought would become the very cage that hollowed out our marriage. Still, I clung to simplicity where I could. I filled my weekends with my daughter, Natalie, now 23, sharp as her father, but with my bite. We'd watch movies, walk the dogs, fish by the dock when we had time. In her, I still saw the life I thought I was building with him. And maybe, deep down, I already knew she'd be the anchor, when everything else came undone. My mother, Helen, still lives in the same creaky old farmhouse just outside Catskill. The one with peeling white paint and a porch swing that never stops squeaking. Every Sunday after church, I'd drive her over to our mansion for dinner. Whether Daniel liked it or not, he'd force a smile, but I could see the annoyance in his eyes. He never understood that family wasn't optional. Then there was Marissa. To me, she wasn't just a friend. He was family. We'd built fences together, hauled furniture up narrow staircases, and shared cheap wine on starry nights when life felt too heavy. When my father passed, Marissa was the one who held my mother's hand at the graveside, steadying her when I couldn't. My trust in her ran deeper than blood. I would have staked my life on it. That's probably why I never saw the cracks forming. Or maybe I refused to. When Daniel and Marissa started showing up at charity events together, staying out late with planning meetings, I told myself it was harmless. He said I was too tired, too buried in my work. I believed him, so I kept working harder, thinking love could be rebuilt with sweat and sacrifice. But slowly, the silence grew. Daniel moved into the guest room more nights than not. Our conversations dried up, replaced by empty pleasantries and cold distance. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, haunted by the memory of those porch nights when sandwiches and dreams had been enough. I kept replaying something my Aunt Eleanor once told me when I was a teenager. The oddball of the family, the one who showed up to Christmas in silk scarves and diamonds. She leaned close and whispered, "Never mistake a roof for safety. Sometimes it just hides the truth until it finally crashes down on you." Back then, I thought it was nonsense. Now, it was prophecy. The collapse of my marriage wasn't a single explosion. It was erosion, slow, silent, steady, until all that was left between us was paperwork. Even then, I never imagined just how far Daniel would go. Not until the storm broke full force. It happened on a Thursday. I remember it because Thursdays were my early days. I had just wrapped up a nursing shift in Syracuse, exhaustion weighing down my bones. My shoes were sticky with hospital floors, my back aching, but I still stopped at Daniel's favorite Italian bakery in White Plains. I brought home his favorite cannoli, convinced that maybe, just maybe, sharing dessert on the porch could bring us back to the people we once were. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Marissa's truck parked by the garage. At first, it didn't raise alarms. She'd been there plenty of times before, dropping off food, helping with small things. But something in the air felt wrong. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel like peace, but like a warning. I slipped in through the back door, past the kitchen, and that's when I heard it. A laugh, soft, muffled, floating down from upstairs. Her laugh I'd know anywhere, and his, Daniel's, the same laugh that used to wrinkle the corners of my eyes when he teased me years ago. Only this time, it wasn't meant for me. I didn't storm up the stairs. I didn't scream. My heart begged me to run, but my feet dragged me upward, step by step, each one heavier than the last. By the time I reached the bedroom door, I already knew. His voice, her laugh, both spilling through the crack. I pushed it open. There they were. My husband, my best friend. No shame, no panic. Just the silence of people who knew they'd been caught and didn't care enough to lie about it. Marissa scrambled for her shirt. Daniel didn't move. He sat on the edge of the bed, cool as glass, one hand on his leg, smoothed his hair, and said the calmest words I'd ever heard. "You're early." Marissa tried to speak, something hollow, something weak, but I didn't hear it. I turned away, walked down to the garage, and sat on a stack of lumber, staring at the floor. The late nights, the excuses, the silence, It had all been leading here. That night, I slept in the guest room. The cannoli I'd brought home for him stayed untouched on the counter. By morning, it was in the trash, and so was my marriage. Daniel filed for divorce before the sun had set. He didn't want conversation, closure, or compromise. He wanted blood. He laughed when I suggested we settle quietly. "You're the nurse, not the strategist," he sneered. "Let the court decide." And with that, he unleashed one of the most expensive divorce attorneys in the state. A man named Victor Donovan, tailored suits, smile too white, eyes that cut like a shark. In court, he tore me apart. He painted me as unstable, temperamental, a woman who neglected her husband. They pulled texts out of context, dragged in coworkers from years ago, twisted my life into something unrecognizable. Even my financial records from the recession were weaponized, as though surviving hard years meant I was hiding something. The courtroom became a theater, and I was the villain in their script. I sat there in a suit that felt 2 sizes too small, choking me while strangers dissected my life like it was evidence in a crime. Across the courtroom, Daniel didn't shed a single tear. He looked polished. Black suit, hair slicked back, legs crossed, like he was attending a gala, not tearing apart a family. When my daughter Natalie testified, her voice trembling as she tried to tell the court who her father really was, Daniel wouldn't even look at her. He sat stone-faced, pretending the child we raised together didn't exist. That silence cut deeper than any accusation. 9 months of hearings, 9 months of lawyers circling like vultures. And finally, the gavel fell. The mansion, his. Most of our savings, his. The retirement fund, split down the middle. And me? I walked away with my car, my nursing bag, and the keys to a shoebox apartment with peeling paint and air that smelled of dust. I wasn't shocked by the outcome. What stunned me was the emptiness. Not rage, not sorrow, just a hollow numbness, like I was watching someone else's story unravel on a TV screen, and I was nothing more than the background character. Outside the courthouse, I stood alone. Marissa was gone, probably already at the mansion pouring champagne into the crystal glasses I had unpacked years ago with trembling, hopeful hands. Daniel swept past with his lawyer at his side, glanced at me just once, and leaned in close. His whisper was venom. "You're pathetic." Then he walked away. No hesitation, no glance back. And me? I didn't chase him, didn't scream, didn't cry. I walked to the parking garage, slid into my SUV, and sat behind the wheel, my hands trembling like they didn't belong to me. My husband was gone. My best friend was gone. My home, my future, 30 years of building, gone. But that night, something shifted. I couldn't stomach the 4 walls of that barren apartment, so I drove north. No plan, just the need to escape the city and everything it had stolen from me. Around 10 p.m., I pulled into the gravel lot of a diner off Route 11, killed the engine, and let the silence swallow me. I sat there in the driver's seat of my SUV for what felt like hours, the interior growing colder with every minute. My gas tank was nearly empty. My wallet had $23 in it, and my phone battery was down to 5%. I pulled up the Craigslist app and hovered over the post button, thumb trembling. I had typed up a draft ad. 2009 Toyota Highlander, good condition, 1 owner, must sell fast. It was the last thing I owned outright. Selling it would buy me time, but it also meant sleeping in shelters, or worse. For a second, I even scrolled through my old call log. Daniel's name was still there, near the top. My thumb paused over it, my breath shallow. Not to beg, not to reconcile, but because I didn't know who else to call. Then I remembered his words outside the courthouse. "You're pathetic." I locked the phone, set it down on the passenger seat, and stared into the dark. If this was rock bottom, it sure felt like it. I closed my eyes, too tired to cry. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number? I almost let it go. My first thought was the court, or worse, Daniel, calling to rub salt into fresh wounds. I hesitated, thumb hovering over decline. Something told me to answer. A man's voice drifted through the line, steady, polite, with the faint trace of a European accent. "Is this Sarah Whitaker?" My chest tightened. I hesitated before answering. "Who's asking?" "This is Simon Keller with Brecht Private Banking Group in Zurich. We've been trying to reach you for years. Are you the niece of Eleanor Whitaker?" For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. My Aunt Eleanor hadn't crossed my mind in decades. She'd been the outlier in a family of farmers and nurses, the one who wore tailored suits, smoked imported cigarettes, and carried herself like she knew secrets the rest of us never would. She'd show up at birthdays every few years, slip crisp $100 bills into my hand, and then vanish into the world again. By my 20s, she had disappeared completely. Rumor was she fled to Europe, made a fortune, and then simply vanished. I cleared my throat. "Yes, Eleanor was my aunt." "Why?" Simon's voice didn't waver. "Ms. Whitaker, you are the sole listed beneficiary to a dormant account. We are required to contact you before its automatic liquidation. The account has been untouched for 15 years. Your aunt gave strict instructions. The funds could only be released once you were no longer legally bound by a marriage license." The words slammed into me like ice water. My spine straightened. All I could think was, she had known. She hadn't trusted Daniel. I forced the question out. "What kind of funds are we talking about?" There was a pause, deliberate, measured. "As of this evening's statement, the account holds $47,894,421.77. I didn't speak, couldn't. My hands shook on the steering wheel as if the numbers themselves had weight. I stared at the dashboard, half expecting them to appear in glowing digits, confirming what I had just heard. "Are you still there, Ms. Whitaker?" His voice was calm, but mine cracked when I whispered back, "Yes, barely." He went on to explain that my Aunt Eleanor had spent a decade funneling off-the-record investments into a hidden account, private equities, old-world banking bonds, assets shielded in layers of secrecy. The money hadn't sat idle. It had grown, quietly and steadily, locked away in silence, waiting. I asked why no one had reached me sooner. His answer cut deep. "Your aunt was meticulous. She didn't trust your spouse. Her instructions were clear. Release the funds only when your marriage license no longer bound you." And then he repeated words that froze my blood. "Sarah needs to be free before she remembers who she is." The phrase yanked me back to my teenage years, to a humid summer day when Eleanor had taken me fishing. She wore silk where everyone else wore denim, her bracelets clinking against the fishing pole. I remembered her leaning close and telling me, "Money's just a mirror, sweetheart. It'll show you what you're made of. Just make sure you know who you are before you see the reflection." I hadn't understood it then. Now it felt like a prophecy finally unlocking. The banker's voice pulled me back. "We require your physical presence in Zurich to finalize identification and paperwork. All travel and accommodations will be arranged. Once complete, the funds can be transferred to any account you choose." I didn't say yes right away. I told him I needed time. He gave me a direct number, his tone patient, like he already knew I'd call. When the line went dead, I sat in the dark cab of my SUV, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing left in my world. Above me, the stars blinked back, cold and infinite. My reality had shifted in a single phone call. And yet, I didn't feel rich. I didn't feel powerful. I felt small, split between the ashes of the life I had lost and the terrifying unknown of the life waiting for me. The next morning, I called my mother. I expected shock, disbelief, maybe even laughter. Instead, she was calm. "That woman always knew more than she let on," she said of my Aunt Eleanor. "Maybe now you can finally breathe." My daughter Natalie was the next person I called. She stayed silent for a long time before speaking softly. "Mom, you deserve this. Just don't let it change who you are." Her words hit harder than the bank balance. They were a reminder of what was at stake. Not just the money, but me. By afternoon, I had booked the flight to Zurich. No hesitation. I stuffed a duffel with 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, my worn leather wallet, and the watch my mother gave me when I graduated nursing school. I left everything else behind. I didn't tell Daniel. He didn't deserve to know. I didn't want revenge. I didn't need another courtroom. What I needed was the truth, because I knew this was never just about money. It was about something deeper. The plane touched down on a gray Monday morning. Zurich looked like a painting brought to life. Cobblestone streets, sharp suits striding past centuries-old buildings, the kind of order that felt foreign to me. I hadn't left the country since my honeymoon. And now, here I was, walking through a Swiss airport with a bank invitation tucked into my coat pocket. At arrivals, a man in a black Mercedes held a sign with my name. His handshake was firm, his silence practiced. He drove me through the heart of the city, winding up a hill that overlooked Lake Zurich. When we stopped, I stared at a stone building framed by iron gates. The words, Brecht Private Banking Group, etched in gold above the archway. Inside, the place smelled of leather and fresh polish. I was led through long halls until I stepped into a private office that felt more like a library. Mahogany shelves, a massive globe, and a view of the lake so still it seemed to hush the air. A man in his 60s stepped forward, smiling warmly. "Ms. Whitaker, welcome. We've been waiting a very long time." It was Simon Keller, the same voice from the phone. He poured me coffee, slid a thick folder across the desk, and began explaining. Aunt Eleanor hadn't disappeared. She had carefully erased herself from the American financial system. She had liquidated her holdings, shifted her fortune into a fortress of trusts, shell companies, and codes older than modern banking itself. Not illegal, just invisible. Inside the folder were letters, real, handwritten letters from Aunt Eleanor, sealed away until the day my divorce was final. My hands trembled as I unfolded the first one. "Sarah, I know this won't make sense right away, but I've been watching you from afar. I saw the battles you fought. I saw the woman you became. I always intended to leave you something, not just money, but freedom. I couldn't give it to you while you were tied to him. I'm sorry, but I never trusted your husband. I saw through him long before you did." Another letter wasn't addressed to me as an adult, but written years ago, almost like a journal entry. "Sarah builds with her hands. She thinks with her heart. She'll be stronger than I ever was." I had to stop reading. My eyes blurred with tears. For years, I thought she had forgotten us. But the truth was the opposite. She had been planning all along, quietly building a legacy meant to set me free. Simon slid a document across the desk. It authorized the release of everything into any account I chose. Stocks, gold holdings, even a villa in the south of France. All of it mine. My signature trembled onto the page, and just like that, my life shifted again. As I slid the folder back toward him, Simon tapped a smaller envelope on the desk. There is one more matter, he said, choosing his words with care. Your aunt included a legal clause, quiet but enforceable. With your signature, we can freeze any shared or contested assets in the U.S. tied to your former husband. Retroactive leverage, if you choose to use it. I stared at the envelope. The idea of Daniel, blindsided by frozen accounts or IRS investigations, should have thrilled me, but it didn't. What happens if I decline? I asked. Simon leaned back. Then nothing changes for him? No consequences, no warnings, no retaliation. I smiled, a slow, steady thing I hadn't felt in years. Good, I said, pushing the envelope back untouched. I don't need revenge. He has to live knowing I walked away with everything and still chose peace. Simon nodded, quietly impressed. Understood. In that moment, I realized power isn't about taking something back. It's about having the ability to destroy someone and choosing not to. But it wasn't just about the money. Something had cracked open inside me. The bitterness of the divorce was still there, but underneath it was something steadier, stronger. I hadn't lost everything. I had been stripped down to who I really was. On the flight back, I called Natalie. I told her everything. She didn't ask for a cent. She only asked one thing. Does this mean you're coming home? And I did, but not to the hollow apartment I had rented, and definitely not to the mansion Daniel now shared with Marissa. I bought a ranch outside Nashville. Open land, a wraparound porch, space for Natalie to visit whenever she wanted. I laid the floors myself, built the deck with my own hands. Every nail I drove in was a promise. This time, I was building something that couldn't be stolen. A week later, Daniel found out. He called. I ignored it. He called again. This time, I answered. His voice was softer than I'd heard in years. Sarah, I made a mistake. I never stopped loving you. I was angry, confused. We could try again. I let him talk. Then I cut him clean. You didn't love me when I had everything. You loved what I gave you, and now you want me back because of what I'm worth on paper. I'm not the same woman you left. He started to cry. I waited, let the silence stretch, and finally said, I forgive you, Daniel. But I will never forget what you whispered outside that courthouse, and I will never be yours again. Then I hung up. Marissa tried calling too. Her message started with, Sarah, woman to woman, I messed up. Things got complicated. I should have been honest. I didn't let her finish. I hit delete before her excuses could stain the air. I didn't need apologies. I didn't need revenge. What I needed, what I had finally found, was peace. The last gift my aunt left me wasn't locked in francs, gold, or deeds. It was truth. She saw what I couldn't. She gave me the means to rebuild, not just a house, not just a bank account, but a life that finally belonged to me. Now, I wake most mornings before the sun, just like I always did. Old habits don't fade, but instead of racing into 12-hour shifts with a thermos of lukewarm coffee, I sit on the porch of my new home and breathe in the quiet. It's nothing flashy, just a ranch-style house with a gravel driveway, a stubborn old oak out front, and a porch swing I built with my own hands. No marble floors, no chandeliers, just honesty, peace, and silence that carries no guilt. Natalie visits often. She brings her guitar, sits on the porch rail, and strums while I sip coffee or grill steaks. She talks about her life, her dreams of opening a cafe. I offered to stake her, but she shook her head. She wants to earn it herself. That's when I knew she'd make it. Her fire is steady. She carries the best of both her parents, my grit, his sharp focus. I just pray she learns to love better than we did. My mother, Helen, still lives in the same farmhouse I grew up in. She refuses to move, even though I offered her a new place. She always says, I have everything I need right here. And I get it now. You don't always have to upgrade to move forward. Sometimes standing still in the right place is enough. Daniel never called again. Marissa never showed up. Their lives are theirs to carry, not mine. I've stopped dragging their choices on my back. Instead, I've spent these months learning stillness, real stillness. I adopted a shepherd mix named Luna. She follows me everywhere, a shadow with bright eyes. I joined a local veterans group, not because I served, but to volunteer, to lend my hands. I build ramps, decks, benches for parks. It reminds me of something Eleanor already knew. When your hands create something useful, your heart finally rests. These days, I spend my time building again. Ramps, decks, benches for parks. Simple things, but they remind me of a truth I nearly forgot. The work of your hands still matters, no matter how heavy or light your bank account gets. But I knew I couldn't stop there. I remembered those nights curled up in my SUV outside that diner, too lost to sleep, too proud to ask for help, convinced the world had turned its back on me. No one should ever face that kind of loneliness. That's why I took part of the inheritance and created the Whitaker Foundation, to help women rebuilding after divorce, women who feel gutted by betrayal and stripped of their worth. The first event for the Whitaker Foundation was held in a local community center. Nothing fancy, just folding chairs, homemade cookies, and warm hugs. But the room was packed. I stood off to the side at first, watching as women filtered in, some clutching their kids, others still wearing work scrubs or borrowed dresses. I saw pieces of myself in all of them. The exhaustion, the quiet fire, the desperate hope that someone might still see them as worthy. Then a woman stepped up to the mic. Her name was Rochelle. She had fled a marriage almost as toxic as mine and was now finishing her degree in social work. Through the foundation, she'd received 6 months of rent and free legal counseling. None of us came here thinking we deserved a second chance, she said, her voice trembling. But someone believed in us before we could believe in ourselves. Her name is Sarah Whitaker. All heads turned. I didn't expect to cry, but I did. Not because of the applause, not even because of the gratitude. I cried because I realized this was what Aunt Eleanor had meant all along. That freedom isn't something you keep, it's something you pass on. If I can help even one woman stand back up, take a breath, and believe she still has a future, then everything I lost and everything I gained will finally mean something more. The greatest lesson I've learned is this: your worth isn't measured by what's taken from you or by what you own. It's measured by what you can rebuild when everything else is gone. Money didn't fix me. It didn't erase the betrayal. But it gave me something priceless, a second chance to become the woman I always was before life tried to wear me down. I thought the inheritance was the final chapter, but it turns out my aunt left behind something else, something I was never supposed to find. And that's where the next part begins.